Alrighty, today's episode I'm a little bit nervous for.
Nervous?
Nervous.
I'm nervous. Sorry, I shouldn't talk until I'm introduced, do I?
No, that's all right. So I've got Jack Laurence. He is the host of 1 Minute Remaining podcast. Currently...
Oh, let's not talk about the charts, mate. Because those things go up and down. Like, yeah, ridiculous. Anyway.
Was number 3 last time.
Was number 3 in the Australian charts, yeah. Nice. I can guarantee you it's not today. I haven't looked because it stresses me out.
I don't know. It's great listen. Has become my favourite podcast.
Oh, look out.
I do thoroughly enjoy it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm not into crime podcasts, but...
A lot of people have told me, actually, it's funny, a lot of people have said to me, I don't listen to crime podcasts, but I listen because, I know you and I felt bad. But I actually enjoyed it. So that's a high compliment because, there is so many crime podcasts out there. I wasn't even supposed to make one. And it just sort of happened.
Just happened?
Yeah, it just happened.
Randomly?
Yeah. Like, honestly, I was supposed to be making a podcast. I was going to make a podcast, but it was going to be about, believe it or not, the lottery.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's how the story came about.
Oh, the first story?
The Doris Moore story, because she was accused and sentenced for murdering Abraham Lee Shakespeare for his lottery winnings. And I saw this thing that 90% or something of lottery winners after 12 months have got no friends, no family, and no money left.
Yep.
And I'm like, nah, that can't be true. So I did this research, and I spent literally like 4 years researching this podcast.
Yep.
And then, like, only 7 or 8 months ago, maybe 7 months ago, it just changed. Like, so I mean, all those years, 4 years of researching for this fucking podcast, all out the window, and then I made 1 minute remaining. So
you used to work on the radio. Originally, you're from the UK, I think, if I did my research
look
correctly.
at you go, absolutely. Yes, originally from the UK.
Originally from the UK.
Yeah.
Moved here in 2004, 6?
Close.
2. 2002.
Look at him go. Jeez, you'd be a good stalker, you would.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, 2002 moved here.
Questions.
Yeah, moved here from the UK straight to the Goldie, actually, in 2002.
And did you work on radio back home? Or
No, never worked on radio back home.
Actually, you still would have been young when you came.
Yes, I was only 16 when we moved here.
Yep.
So we moved here and I ended up going, I'd finished high school in the UK and then had to go back to high school, which I really did not appreciate. And even to make it even worse, my parents sent me to Hillcrest Christian College. Ooh. And I'll put out, I'm not a religious guy at all. I'm probably what you would call an atheist. So it didn't go too well. I was there for about a year, and then essentially I just came home one day to my parents and was like, I'm not going back tomorrow. Yeah.
And you went straight into media, like that kind of?
No, mate, I've had so many different jobs. Like I started working with my old man because my old man used to have an appliance repair company called Newman's Appliance Repair in Ashmore. Yeah. And I started working for them, just going around with the guys fixing fridges and shit. And then I got a job working at a company called Waco, who do like portable fridges. Yep. So I went there and I worked in the warehouse there, and I sort of worked my way up from in the warehouse through to like internal warranty on the phone, and then sales on the phone, and then eventually to be a sales rep. And then I spent probably from the age of 18 to 19, nearly 20, maybe not that old, maybe only a year. I forget, but anyway, I was 18, 19. I spent as an on-the-road sales rep.
Yep.
Then I was a real estate agent for LJ Hooker in Narang.
Nice.
Did that till and that from there, like I was driving around one day. I as much as like I hated real estate, I hated it. Like I enjoyed talking to people and getting deals together, and that sort of stuff was fun. Yep. But there was a lot of like knocking on people's doors and saying, "Do you want to sell your house?" And like, no, if I want to sell my fucking house, I'll call you. But then my boss was really like, "You got to get out there. You got to get out there." Like, he's a great guy and he's a very, very successful dude. So I mean, he obviously knows what he's talking about, but it just wasn't for me. So I was in the car one day, and I heard a bloke on the radio talking. Actually, Big K, his name, Bicona. He's on Hot Tomato at the moment. I heard him on the radio, and I used to be one of those lame people that would just call up all the time just to hear my voice, on the radio. Nice. And I was loving it. And so I was like, fuck, how do I do this? How do I get into this? And I just couldn't find a way in. And then Radio Metro, I heard about Radio Metro via MySpace of all places. I know. That's
a throwback.
Yeah, I know, old school. And and I went along to Radio Metro, and I started there, and rest was history. 14 and a half years later. Sort of travelled around the country, all the different cities and heaps of different shows, and
nice.
Yeah, it's been a
CFM and that.
Yes, I spent CFM was the. Actually, CFM was wasn't my first station. I started in a station in Lismore after because I was at Radio Metro, and then I sent my audio tape to Lismore, and that was my first full-time paying job.
Yeah.
It was in Lismore, doing the drive shift there. And then I was just badgering the CFM guys like once a week. It was actually Carl Sandlands who got me my job.
True.
Yeah. So Carl had I think he just started on was Australian Idol.
Yeah.
And he was doing his night show at the time. And I literally was sending, because when you're in radio, you send out your audio demos to try and get a job. So I literally was just sending to everyone and anyone I could think of. And, you know, I was getting knockbacks and you know, people saying, oh, you know, you did X, Y, and Z. So I was doing that. I was like getting nowhere. So I was like, oh, fuck, I'm going to send Carl Sandlands an email. So I sent him an email, not expecting anything. And I said to him, you know, would you have a listen to my stuff, blah, blah, blah. Literally within 10 minutes of sending that email, my email pinged and it was from Carl Sandlands. Shat myself. And he's like, yeah, send me your audio. Oh, absolutely. I'll send it. I'll send it to some people I knew. I literally sent him my audio. Didn't think anything of it. And a couple of weeks later, got a phone call from some random dude who was like a pretty head honcho in radio, which I knew nothing about. And literally within 6 months later, I was on the Gold Coast, back on the Gold Coast, just as a casual at CFM. And then I literally hung around that place like a bad smell until I got a job on their drive show as the sort of button monkey, as they call it, the button pusher. And Bex was the drive show back then. And I spent a while on there and then just, worked my way up really, and spent 7 years on the Gold Coast.
Sweet. How does the radio work? Like if you, like you said, you were full time, but how does that work? Because like if your show's for what, 2 hours, 3 hours?
Everyone thinks that you're literally on air for like, so my shift would be like midday till 3. So everyone thinks you rock in, do 3 hours and then fuck off.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's a lot of stuff you have to do stuff behind the scenes as well. So there used to be back in the day, like announcers used to just be announcers.
Yep.
But obviously with the way things, you know, with companies needing to sort of tighten their belts, you got to do a lot of other things. Like my most recent job that I quit before I did the podcast was I came back to the Gold Coast and I took on the role of afternoons announcer, but also as the assistant content director.
Yep.
So which basically means, you know, I was in charge of the day-to-day running of the station. Yeah, so right. My work day would start at 5 a.m. and not finish till, you know, well, it never really finished. When you're a content director or an assistant content director of a radio station, you never stop. Yeah. Like you're always on because the radio doesn't stop.
Yeah, true.
So if there's an issue, you're the one that gets the calls and stuff like that. And that's actually was the catalyst that ended up breaking me to the point where I'm like, I said to my wife, I cannot fucking do this anymore. Yeah. Because I couldn't listen to the radio. Like on the weekend, my wife would put on the radio. I'm like, just please turn it off. Like I can't listen because if something goes wrong and then I hear it, I can't ignore it. I then have to do something about it. Yeah. So I could never like stop. And the money on the Gold Coast, to be honest, is fucking shit. Yeah, like right. I worked for a while in Sydney, where the money's really great. It's good money. But it was a lifestyle decision to come back to the Gold Coast. Yeah. Because we got young kids and we wanted them to grow up here. So I had to take a really hefty pay cut to come back, which was fine at the time because I don't think I understood the scope of the job, and it's something I hadn't done before. So I was like, I'll give it a go. And then you eventually go, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing these many hours for this money? Like, it's just, you know,
just for a lifestyle.
Yeah, and it was a family and a lifestyle decision. But eventually, it just got too much. And I was just like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Like, it mentally broke me. Like, there was weekends like I remember a Sunday where I think it was the defining moment was this Sunday where it just seemed that everything was going wrong. Yeah. And I just, like, people were complaining about X, Y, and Z, and then I was getting phone calls from this person and that person and cranky salespeople going, what the fuck's going on here? And I just stood outside, like, just staring into the fucking distance, like, and I was broken. Like, I hadn't been that broken in a long time. And my wife was like, you've got to get out of this. You've just got to get out.
So you happy with the decision?
Oh, mate, I could not be happy. I mean, I've got different kinds of stresses now, obviously, because I'm not making any money.
Yeah, obviously.
So I've got bills to pay and stuff like that. So luckily, we're in a position where we've got, you know, some savings, and my wife has got a decent job. So, you know, we can afford to, for the next sort of maybe month or two, just, you know, for me to... And I still go back to the station and do on-air stuff. Yep. Like I did the races last weekend and stuff like that, because I still love the on-air side of things. Yeah, yeah. It was just the operational stuff that was I just couldn't do it. Yeah, like, it was just too much.
So in your time on radio, you've worked with a lot of people, Hughesy.
Yep.
was one that you mentioned.
Yeah, so Hughesy and I worked together for about 5 years.
Yeah.
So I joined him and Kate Langbrook. So they had a show, Hughesy and Kate, and at the time it was just, broadcast across the ARN network, which is like Kiss FM and stuff like that, where Carl and Jackie O are on air. And I was on a sort of forced year hiatus from radio because I got made redundant in 2015, I think, from memory, from when we moved to Adelaide for me to do breakfast radio there. And we lasted a year. The show was just not great, basically. And I got made redundant from that. And then I came back to the Gold Coast and worked at the Gold Coast City Council for a year as a social media manager for them.
Interesting.
Which is a great, great job. Like
Council
cruisy as, like so cruisy, good pay, cruisy. But then one day out of the blue, I'd been doing that for a year, and I got a phone call from a mate of mine who was there. They call it an anchor. So you basically say, "Oh, it's Hughesy and Kate for the drive home," push their buttons, and then they go, do their bit. And he called and said, "Oh, would you be interested to get back into radio?" And because I was made redundant, and it was a bit of that was a real shock. Like, because radio, the only thing I'd really ever seriously career-wise like focused on and been like, this is what I want to do. And I really worked hard at it. Like, it was the one thing I really just put my mind to. So to be made redundant was another moment. Like, it was a real low point as well. Because the rug was like, I was just not people say I wasn't expecting it, but I was just the last thing I ever expected. So I felt like I had this unfinished business. Like, on my exit interview, the big boss of the entire company, not the CEO, but he's like what they call the group program director. So he's like in charge of everyone on air. Had a sit down meeting with him, and he's like, he goes, you tried the Cap City thing, you did all right, but you'll never be a superstar.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, this is really bad. And he goes, do I feel sorry for you? Look, not really. One day you'll thank me. I'm just like, you fucking arsehole. So I felt like I had this unfinished business where I was just like, you know what, I can do this. You just put me in a shit situation where it was a culmination of things. So when he called me and said, would you be interested to get back into it? I was humming and ahhing, and he said,
Is this the same dude that...
No, different guy. No, haven't spoken to that guy since. But yeah, so he called me and he's like, would you get back in? It's like, it's the jobs with Hughesy and Kate and blah, blah. So I was humming and ahhing because I was just like, it's a big job. And I think deep down, I probably had some doubts in my own ability because of what had happened. Yeah. So I was like, and even after starting with Hughesy and Kate used to say to me all the time, like, Jack, because I was very meek. I don't know if it's the right word, but I was a bit standoffish and really sort of stood back from the microphone and just let them do their thing.
Yeah.
So she would always pump me up. But so I was like, so we had a few meetings with Hughesy and Kate, and I went down to Melbourne, which is where they're doing the show from, for a couple of times to meet them and sit with them and chat with them. And eventually got offered the job and spent just over 5 years with that. Well, I mean, Kate left the show eventually. We moved back to the state, see if the company that made me redundant. We moved back there to take over from Hamish and Andy. Yeah. So Hamish and Andy came off air.
Big shoes for
Yeah, I know. I remember that. I'd only been working with Hughesy and Kate for a year, and we were on our Christmas break, and I got a phone call from Hughesy, and I was like, oh fuck, because anytime Hughesy calls me, it's never good news. In our history together, now he calls me and it's like I'm it's fine. But when we were working together, it was always something. So he called me on the weekend. It was leading up to Christmas. He goes, so mate, we're not going to be with Kiss next year. I was like, okay. He goes, yeah, we're taking over from Hamish and Andy.
Oh god.
I'm like, oh for fuck's sake. And I was like, okay, it's good. I didn't even know, because I wasn't. It's not like I'm signed to Hughesy and Kate. I was signed to Kiss, the company.
Yeah.
So I'm like, he's like, oh, we'd love you to come with us. And I was like, okay, mate. I said, but I'm in a contract, I think. I don't think I can just leave. And then I went into work after this all happened, and the assistant contractor at that station sort of sat me down. I was like, just want to, see what your thoughts are and your plans are, obviously, with Hughesy and Kate. The boss is a bit, worried that you might be leaving with them. And I went, I didn't know I could. So essentially I was like, I went with them, and then we went and spent a few years there. Kate moved to Italy and did the show from Italy for about 6 months. And
did
then
the radio show from Italy?
Yeah, so she did it from Italy while we did it from here.
Yeah, right.
So we had her in Italy, us in Melbourne. And then Hughesy would travel all the time with his comedy. So sometimes it would be me in Melbourne, Hughesy maybe in Darwin, and Kate in Italy.
You don't realise how like you can be so. You don't have to be in the studio.
And that's the thing. And that's why, again, I love podcasting as well, because you can do it from anywhere.
Yeah.
And with radio, the technology is that so good where we could just hook up a line and put her through, and people would think she was in the room with you. And
that's what you always think, like they're just in the studio.
100%. And there's so many occasions where a lot of shows out there now have people in different places, because they'll sign people. Like there's shows that come out of Melbourne where I know there's I think the Adelaide, I can say this now because the Adelaide show's fucking finished anyway. But the Adelaide show, they had Limo, who's a comedian. Limo, what's his last name? Anyway, Limo, he does this show in Adelaide, but he's from Melbourne.
Yeah.
But he does a show from Melbourne like 90% of the time, and the other guys are in Adelaide. Interesting. And there's so many shows like that, like Kate, Tim and Joel on Nova, the Drive show. They're split up most of the time as well.
That's interesting.
There's a lot of those shows that do that. So yeah, Kate did that for 6 months and then decided that she wanted to do 6 months in Italy without having to work and just focus on enjoying living in Italy. And then Ed Kavalee joined us.
Got a few questions about Ed.
Ed Kavalee.
Yeah.
so Ed joined us. Of course, people may know him from Have You Been Paying Attention?
That's my show every Monday night.
Yeah.
I tell the missus, I say, do not talk to me from 8:40.
It's such a popular show. It really is amazing.
I didn't realise how popular it was until I started talking about it.
It's huge. Like, man, it wins the ratings like pretty much every night it's on.
Have you been paying attention? That's very interesting, because when I was looking up yourself and I saw that you did the illustrations for Ed Kavalee's
for his kids book. Yeah.
So that, and you have your own as well?
Yeah, I've got my own kids book. Yes, that's a side. I've got my wife likes to say that I've got creative ADD because I literally I'm always wanting to do something. Like at one point I was pitching a TV show to Stan, and my idea involved a puppet.
Yeah.
And I looked at getting it. I looked at getting it bought. I looked at getting it made, and it was like $3,000. I'm like, fuck that. I reckon I can make one. So I made one, and it turned out really well, and I enjoyed it. So then all of a sudden I started just making puppets. So I was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I can sell these things for fucking fortune. People sell these for like $3,000. And so there was that, and then but the drawing, I've always drawn since I was a kid, and when lockdown happened, I took it a bit more seriously. Like I got an iPad to draw with, and blah blah blah. Spent an entire year just drawing every single day and just building up that sort of skill and trying to make a bit of extra money on the side doing that, which I did, here and there. I've drawn like about, I think it's 6 kids' books.
True.
But not like ones of Ed's caliber, like just on Fiverr, Fiverr. So I was putting myself on Fiverr. So all these people who always, had kids' book ideas but couldn't afford like a decent illustrator, they hired me. So
sweet.
But yeah, so Ed's manager rang me one day and was like, "Oh, Ed is doing a kids' book, and he's told the publisher that he's not doing it unless you illustrate it." I'm like, okay, cool. She's like, it's a very tight turnaround. I'm like, okay, cool. Oh, God. So yeah, next minute, I ended up illustrating his kids' book. So that was an interesting one. But yeah, Ed's a great guy. Ed's an extremely, I think he's I don't want to say underrated but he's very, very clever and very, very funny.
He's very quick-witted.
Oh mate, yeah, he's a silent. He's not brash and in your face. But he's a quite achiever, old Ed. He does very well for himself.
I love watching him and Sam Pang.
Yeah, they're
Sam
back
Pang
and forth.
Is so funny as well. Yeah, it's good. I just got tickets to his show. Freaking sold out real quick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All these guys, mate.
I didn't realize how popular they actually were.
Yeah, it's incredible. That show, as I said, it's a juggernaut of a show, and it just always wins the ratings. So working with Ed was fantastic, and he's very helpful and great with. Any of my ideas, like he'll message me and, ask me what I'm doing and blah, blah, blah. So working with him is great. We're obviously, because when Kate left, we were trialing people to be on the show.
Yeah.
And Ed was one of the last ones. Ed wasn't really a trial. Well, I suppose Ed was a trial, but then we had like Hamish came in for a week. He was never going to be on the show, but he just came in to hang out for a week. So that was cool. And a few other people popped in, but Ed ended up being the sort of main guy on the show. And it was that was probably, I think, my time with Hughesy and Kate was phenomenal, but I think I was too caught up in the past and struggling with the demons of not being good, being fired and losing my job and stuff like that. So I wasn't really enjoying the show.
Yeah.
I constantly felt on fucking edge. Like I could do anything. Like any minute now I'm going to lose my job type thing. Yeah. But, you know, and it was fun and stuff like that. And I think towards the end I really started to enjoy it. And then, but by the time Ed came in, because also Hughesy, I think, because he had this comfort zone with him and Kate where he just, you know, it felt comfortable for him. When she left, I think he was just, again, like it was just, I was the familiar part of that show. Like he felt, you know, because and that made me feel a bit more included.
Yeah.
And I just had the best fucking time. But that show when it was Hughesy and Ed, we just had a fucking ball. Like it was just laughing and fucking. It was just great fun. And then they eventually decided they were going to send that show to Sydney to do breakfast. And Erin Molan joined the show. And you know, it was good, but I had to take a major step back for that show because you can't have four voices talking on the radio. It's just too confusing for listeners. Plus, you've got three big personalities there, so they don't need me fucking, you know,
just chiming in.
Yeah, chiming in. But Hughesy wanted me to stay with the show because he was just Hughesy likes that familiarity, and he knows that he knew that I know what he wants from me, and you know, to help him with his performance on air. So he was like, you know, Jack stays with us type thing, which is, you know, wonderful. Like he's a very loyal person. So I mean, I had no other option. Like, you know, I wasn't sure about doing breakfast radio because the hours are fucked. But you know, again, the money's great. And so I did it for a year, but it just got to the point where I just felt like, one, I think I'd done my time. Like, you know, I was 5 years now as an anchor on that show. And I think I felt like I had more to offer than just, because I literally was just going, oh, it's 104.1 Today FM, Hughesy, Ed and Aaron. And that's it. That's literally all I'd fucking say.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, when it was just the two of them, I could join in because you know, you've got that dynamic of one saying the other, and then I'm picky in the middle and kind of doing that. But then obviously once you bring in a third person in, they fill that gap.
Yeah.
And then I no longer really have a voice. Yeah, exactly. Apart from what time is it and temperature and the weather. So it goes to show that when I left, they didn't replace my role. They just put someone in to turn the microphones on, essentially. So Ed then took over as the anchor, and then they just have a guy in there to push the buttons.
Sweet. So then you just went, fuck
it. We'll came back to the Gold Coast, and as I said, we did that job for a few months, only 6 months I think I lasted.
Yeah.
And this podcast sort of idea started to roll. And I just said to my wife, well, fuck, I'll just give this a crack and, you know,
dive into it.
See what happens, you know. If it doesn't work out, then I'll find another job.
Plenty of work around.
Well, yeah. I mean, the trouble is I'm not qualified to do any of the work that's around, really. I mean, I could do night fill. But yeah, because I've only done radio really for my entire career.
Well, the podcast seems to be doing really well. So it's you interviewing, you ring them, they ring you on the phone. Prisoners.
They ring me, so they ring me. So I mean, it's so funny because I say, oh, fucking the breakfast radio hours are fucked. But I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning still now to do these. But at least I only have to just walk downstairs to my room downstairs to record them. But yeah, so they ring me. Sometimes they don't ring. Sometimes, man, I had a week last week where I got up every single morning and just the phone just didn't ring.
Do you know what morning they're going to ring? Or
well, yeah, we generally, because we talk also via email.
Yep.
So we set up the chats and discuss, you know, when we're going to talk and what time we're going to talk through the week. And but then things can happen. Obviously, it's prison, so things can happen. Like they have count time, and you know, shit can go wrong, and there's lockdowns. Like the other day, this guy I'm talking to, Anthony Duke, he was supposed to call me and didn't call me. I was like, oh. And it's not like I can call them and be like, oh, you're late for the interview.
Where are you?
Yeah. Although there's one guy I can call because he has his own mobile phone. But yeah, so he's like, and then he called me. He's like, oh, we just come out of lockdown. There was a murder. I'm like, hey, yeah, right.
It's just some casual.
Yeah, sure there was. Yeah, of course. So they call me. We chat. They get half an hour to talk. And then after that half an hour, the phone just cuts out, and then they have to wait half an hour before they can call me back.
That's interesting. So they can call you more than once.
Yeah, they can call me more than once. So so they just have to wait that half an hour, and that's apparently to stop people from basically hogging the phones. So their account can't call anyone for half an hour, so they have to go away and then come back.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So they've actually got a lot of freedom to talk. Like, you know, they've got email. As I said, they've got email. I mean, all that stuff gets monitored. Yeah, like it's very it's apparently a lot easier for them these days to be able to talk to people than it was back in the day.
Jesus. So how do you find them? How do you?
Well, it started with that Doris when I found her story. So 4 years ago when I was working with Hughesy and Kate, about 4.5 years ago, I saw that story, the lottery story, and I sent Doris a letter. I just literally wrote her a letter. I said, I'd love to tell your story. And she sent me a letter back, and that was it. Yeah, and then she basically acts as my in-prison producer at the moment. She goes around the prison and finds other people for me to talk to. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so she'll message me going, I've got someone else for you on Friday, blah, blah, blah. So, and sometimes I'll call, I have no idea who they are, what they're calling, what they've done. I just find out on the morning. So I spoke to her, and then while talking to her, because her story's mental, and it was just I was getting lost with all the twists and turns of the interview. I'm like, how am I going to make sense of this into a podcast?
Because I listened to it. That was, and then when she's talking about sending tapes and all that.
Yeah,
that was her. She got everything recorded.
Yeah. So she got all these recorded tapes. Yeah,
and I'm sitting there. I'm like, no, she doesn't.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, she sends them to me. Yeah, I didn't think she did too. I thought she was like talking nuts. I literally thought she was like crazy.
Yeah.
And even she said to me, she goes, "I'm so glad you got the tapes because I thought you were going to think I was crazy." I'm like, I did. But while talking to her, she's like, "Oh, do you want to talk to my law clerk who's helping me with my case?" And I'm like, "Yeah, great. Send me her number. I'll give her a call." She's like, "Oh, no, I'll set it up from here." I was like, "Okay." She's like, "Yeah, she's in prison with me." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I've got to talk to this lady." So then I talked to Kimberly Boone, is her name, and in the chat, because we were supposed to be talking obviously about Teresa's case, but I was like, "Well, I need to know why you're in there for." And then she started telling me her story. She was arrested for the attempted murder of her husband and charged with that, not once but twice. I'm like, what? So I was like, okay, well now I need to know your story, and then it just sort of clicked. So in my head it clicked because I was hitting a lot of dead ends with the lottery podcast because people who win lots of money, funnily enough, don't want to talk. They want to stay hidden, which is fair enough. So would I. So I was struggling with that one, and I couldn't see any longevity in it because the thing about obviously with podcasts, you want to keep it going for a long time.
So you're always going to podcast the first one, the
lotteries thing.
Yeah.
So I was always planning on podcasting the lottery one because I had a lot of contacts. People who had won. I found a daughter of a guy who won a stack of cash and then died. With no money and all this sort of stuff. So I had a few stories to tell. So I was always going to go down that way and build a podcast around that. And then this kind of just presented itself, and I just went, "This has longevity. This has more to it. This is more." And I also, because I was telling people at work these stories, and they were like fascinated. And every day I'd come in, they're like, "What? Tell us more." Like what's?" So I'm like, okay, there's obviously this appetite for it. And I was very anti doing a true crime podcast because there's just so many of them. But then again, there's so many podcasts, so it was a case of. But in my head, I'm like, well, this is a bit of a different angle because most of the true crime podcasts, people are telling stories, or talking to victims, or talking to cops, or talking to, not many people I think are talking to the actual people in prison.
Yeah.
Obviously Serial's the most famous one, which was the original true crime podcast. There's another one that's done from inside San Quentin, which is a brilliant podcast, but I can't remember the goddamn name of it right now. But that's a great podcast. But other than that, I was trying to rack my brains. I'm like, I don't really know anyone else that's talking to criminals in prison. So that's when I was like, okay, well, I'll just give this a go. And so far, it seems to be doing all right.
It's such a great concept. It's so cool.
Well, it's fun, and it's so funny because it was an accident.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because you look at a lot of people who have these ideas and they seem to go really well, and most of the time they're like, oh yeah, it just kind of happened, and it did. It just kind of happened, and I obviously took a huge risk in quitting a full-time job to make this happen. And it's great having a podcast at the top end of the charts, but let me tell you, it does not equate generally to the fact that you've got hundreds of thousands of listeners and you're making money, because I am making no money. I've definitely got more listeners than I had, but but now I'm like, I don't know I have some form of anxiety. I don't know what it is, but I have some form of anxiety. but it always manifests itself in different ways. Like now it's like I'm just fucking obsessed with numbers on the download numbers.
Yeah.
And it takes over my life. Like, and everyone's just like, stop worrying about the numbers, just focus on. I'm like, no, but I need the like. And then I see a drop because obviously we had I got invited onto True Crime Conversations, which is a true crime podcast, pretty big one. Like Mamma Mia's the guys that produce it, so they invited me on to talk about a case, and I was getting about, I think, like average. Like on a launch day of a podcast, I get about 650 downloads.
That's not bad.
So it's all right. So I was like, I was happy with that, but obviously I knew I needed more to be able to monetize it. And then, so that was on launch day, but then when on not a launch day, it was about 200 downloads.
Yeah.
So it was all right. It was okay. It wasn't, and I'd only just started. It was a few weeks in. But then I got invited on this fucking podcast, and the day I got invited, I got 2,500 downloads.
Jesus.
The day it launched. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then the next day was 3,500. And the next day was 4,500.
Yeah, sick.
And I was like, boom, boom, boom. I was like, okay. And then I'm just like, but then don't worry, because it comes back down again. It's like you get this fucking, you look at my little chart because you'll follow this, the progression of downloads, and it just like this nice Mount Everest, but then you've also got to come down that mountain. And the last few days for me for downloads have just been, and that's the problem. Like, and then it's never enough. And Hughesy used to say this to me all the time because he is one of the richest men I know. He's filthy rich. Like he's got so much fucking money.
True.
Yeah, and he won't mind me saying that. He's got. I mean, and it's so funny. He doesn't flash it around.
Yeah, he seems very humble.
No, mate, he doesn't. He literally says he's got no vices. He doesn't take drugs. He doesn't drink. Doesn't even eat meat.
Doesn't gamble.
Oh, he will occasionally gamble. Like I remember one day he goes, "I've got fucking $700 in me fucking my account. Man. Let's have a punt on something." So I've got a mate of mine who used to be a professional punter, so I messaged him like, "Oh, what can we put money on?" He's like, "Oh, this horse," and he lost, so he wasn't happy about that. But yeah, so he used to say to me, because we used to always joke about how much money he's got, and he used to say, "Mate, doesn't matter how much you got, it's never enough." And although you could say, well, it's easy for a rich guy to say.
Yeah.
And, I used to say to him, well, give me your money and I'm happy to give it a go.
Exactly.
I'm happy to have a crack. But it's very true because I know when I first started the podcasting, I just wanted this amount of downloads. Yeah. And then I hit that. I'm like, but then that's not enough. I'm like, well, I need this amount of downloads. And then, and it's like, I've had a great run over the last week or so. Because my podcast is still, I'm only 9 episodes in. So it's still, for a podcast, very early days, but yeah, it's never enough. Yeah, and I just think to myself, like, will it ever be enough?
See, I'm glad I don't look at the numbers.
Yeah, see, I wish that was me.
Like, because we get maybe 300-400 downloads an episode.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah, great, mate. The average download for a fucking podcast is like, if you're getting 100 downloads an episode, you're in the top 50% of podcasts.
Yeah, right. That's interesting.
Top 50%.
It's because there's so many.
Oh, mate, there's
so many.
And that's the thing. And that's the thing I've found the hardest thing about podcasting is not making the episodes, it's getting people to listen because there's so many.
Yeah, exactly.
There is just so many, and it's just cutting through and trying to get people to listen.
Yeah.
And that's, like, for me, like, because it's obviously I'm a one-man band. Oh, no, actually, I was going to say a one-man band. I'm not a one-man band. I've got an audio guy who helps me, Dom, who's a genius. So he helps me with the episodes. But essentially, like, I'm doing all the chasing for interviews and, finding people and editing everything and, getting the episodes ready and making sure they all sound right and, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do these interviews. But then on top of that, you then got to go, well, fuck, how am I going to get people to listen to this?
Yeah.
And it's just like, and especially I feel it's compounded for me as well because I have no income.
Yeah.
And and I have a mortgage and I have kids.
There you go.
And I have that stress because my wife said to me, she goes, "Don't you dare quit your fucking job and then stress about money." So, in case she ever listens, she doesn't even listen to my podcast. If she listens,
it must be a partner thing because mine doesn't listen either.
No, she didn't even. I was on Sky News last night. She didn't fucking watch.
I did actually watch that.
Oh, did you? Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Because my wife certainly fucking didn't. I come home and I was like, the kids were still up, and it was like I don't know, 7:45, and I got home and the kids were still up, and they're usually well in bed by then. And I thought, oh, she's left them up to watch Daddy on the TV. Oh. Nah. I went upstairs and I was like, oh, did you see it? She goes, oh, no, we didn't. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, I was bathing the kids and dinner. And I'm like, yeah, you could have had the TV on in the background. So, but anyway, no. Yeah, so I spend my life just, these days now stressing about fucking numbers. So I feel like it's the better you do, the more stressful, well, for me anyway, it becomes, because then you worry about then keeping that audience around and, because you get to the point where you monetize these things and then sponsors are going to want to see download numbers.
Exactly.
So then you look at your download numbers, if they start going down, your sponsors are then going to fuck off and you're going to go, oh, God.
And there's no money.
Yeah. So anyway, but look, it's fun, this podcasting stuff.
It is fun. It's really fun.
It is. I must admit, like, it's fun being my own boss.
Yeah.
Just doing my own thing and,
I'd say you can do it whenever, but you...
Well, and that's the other thing. I'm working 7 days a week at the moment. Like, that's... but it's something it's for me. Like, it's not for a big company. It's for something for me and for my family. Yeah. So I'm happy to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm happy to work Monday to Sunday. Yeah. But then good. I've got the ability to say, you know what, today I'm not going to do anything. So
that's fair. Yeah. So how do you choose like who you're going to share their story for? Do you just...
At this stage, I'll be honest, I'm taking everybody.
Just taking everyone.
Yeah, because I feel like and I think this is in life. I think everyone's got a story. I think... Yeah, even that was another podcast idea I had. Just literally walking up to randoms in the street and just grabbing them and getting their stories.
There's two young boys for that on TikTok.
Oh, is there?
They literally sit on the street. I'm pretty sure it's called like the sidewalk or something.
Yeah.
And they just sit on the side of the street and just go, you. And that person sits down. They give them a mic.
Great. See, every idea's been done. There's no such thing as a new idea.
They grabbed this dude and like people walking past and they were like, oh, like what are you doing? Like,
is this the producer of the Stranger Things? I have seen that. Yes. Yeah.
They're like, who are you?
He was literally walking past and people were like, oh, I love your work. And they're like, sorry, who the fuck are you? No, I have seen that. So, and that's the thing. Like, so in my opinion, like everyone's got a story. So, and if they're in prison, they've definitely got a story. Yeah. Whatever it is, they've got a story to tell. And I find I've always been fascinated by prison stuff. I don't know why, it's a weird fascination, but I have always had a fascination with prisons and crime. And, one of my favourite books is Chopper's books. I love his books and, all that sort of stuff. So I've always had a fascination in that world and that life. So it's kind of funny that this has happened because I've always, I've watched all the documentaries on prison and stuff like that. Don't fancy going. I think I'll try and stay on there.
Did you visit any of them?
I did think about that. And I think I would. Like, I'm not that I'm not, I wouldn't find any of them frightening. All the ones I talked to, but then Jeffrey Dahmer was nice too, they say. So,
my missus has a weird thing for him at the moment.
Everyone does. Well, this is that Netflix has really got a lot to answer for, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Because they're making these serial killers heartthrobs.
Yeah, like Ted Bundy.
Yeah, exactly.
Zac Efron.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get the hottest guy on fucking screen to play a killer. But I think would I visit them? I probably would. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought about this the other day because Doris, there's every potential Doris could get out of prison. Like, she's got an evidentiary hearing coming up. She's got blood DNA or something that they found and they didn't test. So, look, there's every chance she could get out.
Well, her case is very strange. Like,
oh, mate.
How did they not listen? She was the one with the tapes, yeah?
Yeah.
How did they not listen to the tapes or watch the videos?
Well, and this is the thing. But I've listened to these. So, for anyone listening who obviously hasn't heard it, She was caught in an undercover sting in recordings. They said that she killed this guy for his lottery winnings and then buried him in the backyard of one of her properties. And then she told me that it was actually that he was involved in loaning his winnings to drug dealers because there was a lawsuit coming up and he didn't want his money being taken off him. So, of course, like what else would you do than just give it to drug dealers to use? So they were supposed to be paying him back, and obviously, drug dealers don't tend to want to,
pay back.
Yeah, so they wanted to keep the money. And she says that they killed him. And she had all these recordings because she initially met him because she wanted to write a book about him because it was just a fascinating story, which it is. And she said not long after meeting him, she realised that there was all this shit going on. So she was doing her own recordings, quite undercover recordings, and she had it all. She had tapes, video, and she posted it to me. So I've watched video of her with Abraham where he does admit that, like, he's saying that he's worried for his, like,
that's so hectic.
Someone's going to kill him.
That's so hectic.
And then there's another one where it's a recording with her talking to another lady who knew Abraham very well. And Doris says to him, like, was he loaning money to drug dealers? And she's like, was it a big secret? And there's another one where two blokes, alleged drug dealers, are saying that Doris will get killed. They say she'll disappear if she doesn't stop talking about a certain person. So it's hectic shit. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on there.
And you got sent the tape.
I got sent them, yeah. DVD arrived at work from the prison. And I'm like, part of me for a while was like, because I was talking to some mates about it, and one of my mates was like, just be careful, dude. Like, you know, I'm like, yeah. So which is why I never actually used, and I used actors to play the part of these people, so that they couldn't, and I didn't use any names, so can't link anyone. So if anyone's out there,
because lawyers told you not to.
Yeah, so I had two lawyers, because I was gonna just do it, and then I think one day I was just like, still thinking about it, I was like, oh, I should probably check this. So I found a lawyer who actually joins me on the podcast now. He's fucking great. Michael Leonard's his name. He's an attorney in the US. So I found him and I spoke to him about it, and he's like, oh, look, just cover your ass and, you know, just in case. And then a guy in Australia, I found a lawyer here and spoke to him about it, and essentially he said the same thing, like, you know, just cover your ass because you never know. And the American lawyer was like, very much doubt there's a case there for anyone to come to you, like, and try and sue you. Yeah. But just to be safe, like, and you know, and it still sounds fine and stuff like that, and so we didn't end up playing the audio, but I've got it all there and I've listened to it all, and it's mind blowing.
It's scary.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Yeah. That's good, so that's another reason. That's one potential reason why I might not go into Florida, because I don't know if I'll be the most popular person in Florida.
Yeah, true. All the people you speak to, are they all in Florida?
No, there's most of them are in Florida. So I got two guys that I talked to are in Florida. The guys I found through TikTok, their families found me. I put some videos on TikTok and their families found me and put me in touch with them. And one of the guys, Rio, he's the guy with the mobile phone. He's in Florida. So he just messaged me on Facebook one day, Messenger. It's like, hi, Jack. I was like, I thought it was a scam. So I was like, just send a thumbs up back. And he's like, oh, my name's Rio. I'm serving a life sentence in Florida prison. And I'm like, yeah, but you're on Facebook. Like, what the fuck?
What are you doing, bro?
So, and then he called me from his mobile phone in prison. And he's like, oh, have you got WhatsApp? I prefer to use WhatsApp. I'm like, yeah, sure, we can talk on WhatsApp.
Does he have Wi-Fi in there?
Yeah, they do, man. Wi-Fi dongle. He's got a Wi-Fi dongle, and there are 10 of them. Like, they can connect 10 things to it, and they have a Wi-Fi dongle that they use, and they get given these tablets in prison which they can use, and there's obviously locked, and they can use certain things, but they've managed to unlock them, so they've all got Gmail and everything. So
I know, just randomly, I know we've got a family friend who's actually in prison in the States.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like for nothing special, like just traffic offences.
Yeah,
nothing you want to hear about.
Yeah, I was going to say, give me their number.
Anyway, yeah, so he's got a tablet.
Yeah.
And we can speak to him, but it's through like JPay or whatever they call it.
And that's how I talk to them. Same thing. Yeah. So exactly the same situation. They've got tablets, and they get their own tablets, and they can send on the emails on the JPay.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's very weird. But apparently, they've got some of them got it set up so they actually have like phones. But then this guy Rio sent me a video the other day. These gang members have made a rap video in the prison. And then, mate, some of the knives these guys have got, and like this freaking long, and there's like drugs everywhere, and like they're walking down the roads with these bags of drugs, and it's insane. I said to him, I was like, "This is crazy." He goes, "Dude, it's so dangerous in here." I'm like, "Yeah, I can see that."
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah. But he's doing a life sentence for stealing someone's Rolex watch.
Yeah, right.
Life sentence. No possibility of parole.
I don't understand the legal system.
Oh, mate, actually in an episode coming up, I'm talking to a former federal judge about sentencing.
Yeah,
because it's just like, you know, this especially Florida, it seems, is just like crazy. Like they've got the harshest penalties around. Like literally, like everyone gets life sentences. And a lot of them say it's to do with, obviously it's because prisons over there are businesses. Like they're
all privately owned.
All privately owned. They're business. And like Rio was telling me, like there's nothing in there that they can do or get without having to pay money. So tablets and, you know, food and anything at all, anything that they need or want they have to pay for. And obviously then the state then pays the company to keep them housed in there as well. So he said this is what in his. I mean, obviously he's been locked up, but he said essentially that's why they get these long sentences because they want to keep them in there because it's a paycheck, like it's money to the. But I mean, obviously, I'm sure a judge would disagree with that statement, but that's why I'm getting a judge on to talk about this guy who's coming out, David Talley, who's been given a 100-year sentence. Didn't kill anyone, didn't hurt anyone. He hit a police car with his car, two police cars with his car, and got charged with 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer, which carries a 30-year maximum. So he got 2 counts. So that was 60 years, 60 years for that. And then all these other charges, he got the maximum on every sentence that he got. And it added up to just over 100 years.
How? Like how?
Well, he robbed a service station after hours. There was no one there. He robbed it after hours to pay for his drug habit. And it was, I think he'd been to jail 3 times previously before that for short sentence, like 6 months here. It was always for burglaries of shops after hours because he said he wasn't a violent person and he just needed to steal shit to pay for his drug addiction. He'd asked to go to rehab many times. So he didn't do any violent crimes. It was only burglaries to pay for his drug addiction. He asked to go to rehab in one of his court appearances and they said no. You're going to jail. But then this was his like 4th time in front of the judge. So he'd been getting in trouble a fair bit. And I know a lot of people will be like, well, you reap what you sow, which I get that. And he doesn't say that he says he should have gone to he needed to go to prison and he wasn't doing the right stuff and prison was on the cards and that was whatever. But he was going to get 5 or 6 years, I think, for this crime. And he said in his mind he was sick of the cycle of the drugs and the prison and he was just over it. So his plan was he asked the judge for a couple of days to get his affairs in order, say goodbye to his kids, and before he came back for his sentencing. But in his mind, he said he was not going back to jail. Like he was going to go home and fucking knock himself.
Oh, true.
Yeah, so he went home. He tried to knock himself. He took some of his dad's medication, drank a heap of booze, but it didn't work. His old man got home. He ended up taking his old man's car and pissing off. So his dad obviously was worried about him and him hurting other people because he was driving under the influence. So he called cops and said, look, this is the situation. My son's, I don't want him to hurt himself or anyone else. Eventually, they caught up with him, but this car chase happened. As I said, he hit 2 police cars in the car chase because they came down he was going up a one-way street. They come the wrong way down the one-way street and hit him. Bang. So eventually he ends up stopping, getting out the car, lying flat on the ground. Apparently they put the boot in a few times, ended up in hospital for a couple of days because of that. But eventually he goes obviously back in front of the judge, and he said the judge was just pissed. Like he just said, same judge. He said, what if you killed someone? It would have come back on me. You made me look like a fool. Blah 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 blah, and then sentence him to the maximum on every single charge. So he spent 22 years in jail so far.
That's so hectic,
and that's more than some people get for murder. He's there for the rest of his life, unless he can get out now. I mean, in my opinion, like he should be out time served.
Yeah,
he's been in jail for 22 years. He hasn't touched a drug since he's been in jail. He's become a law clerk. He's turned his life around, and with no help from the prison system because they don't give a shit.
Yeah, no.
Like he could literally sit in there and just take drugs, but he hasn't, and he's become a better man. He's sorted his life out. So I would, in my opinion, obviously I'm not in charge of this stuff and whatever, but in my opinion, he's done 22 years, changed his life. It should be looked at. Okay, we let this guy out.
Chance,
he did some stupid shit when he was younger and took drugs, and it's addiction and all the rest of it. And he's changed his life. So I'm trying my best to try and get him out. But the trouble is, most of these people can't afford a lawyer.
Yeah,
they have no money to pay for an attorney, so they have to either do it themselves or rely on a public defender. And public defenders have got hundreds of cases, and they just cannot focus their attention on one case. So that's the biggest issue. And that's like a lot of, I wish the podcast was earning good money because I legitimately would help fund these people some lawyers. So that is my hope eventually, that this thing does well enough where I can do that.
Yeah.
I'd love to have a little kitty where I can, if I, come up, I don't want to just start dishing out money to everyone I talk to.
Get a lot of guests that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'd never be short of a story.
Yeah, no.
But things like people like David crop up. I'd love to be able to go, you know what? here's whatever you need, $5,000. Go and get yourself an attorney. Let's see if we can get you out.
Yeah.
So that would be my hope eventually, that we get to that point where we have got some money where we can help people.
So why American?
Because they're the only ones I can talk to. Can't talk to Australian prisoners. Because when Australian prisoners go in to jail, they have to hand over a list of phone numbers that they want to be able to talk to.
Yep.
You have to be on an approved list, and then they can call you. Whereas it's just easier with the inmates. It does. I mean, obviously, Doris makes it a lot easier because you have to get hold of their inmate number, know where they're housed, and it's a bit of a process. So, and I've done that with a few inmates, but Doris makes it a lot easier, obviously, because she finds these people, and if family members get in touch with me again, that's a lot easier because they can give me every bit of information I need to go out and find these people. And a lot of people, prisoners don't want to talk as well. Like, I've had actually just this week, one lady who had started talking to me and telling me her story. She messaged me and just said she doesn't want to talk anymore. So I've lost her. But so it is a bit up and down, and also. I would like to venture out and do other places. I'd love to do Australia, but again, it's just too hard. At the moment it's too hard. I might investigate it further and see if there's a way I can do it. But yeah, so it's purely just number one, ease, and number two, because the population, there's such a huge percentage of people are in prison in America.
Yeah,
like it's just there's so many stories to tell.
Yeah.
And again, like we don't have the sort of sentencing here that they have over there. With these crazy, 100 years. Or there was someone the other day who got 4 life sentences plus 150 years. Why don't they just say, "Oh, you're going to jail and you're never getting out"? Yeah. Like it's just
because over there, life is life.
Yeah, life is life for them. Yeah, life is 100% life. It's not like
all the death row ones would be.
Yeah, I've got one death row inmate. Well, I mean, she's not on death row anymore. She was. So she was on death row, youngest woman to be put on death row in Florida at the time. She's now off death row, but she's still got 2 life sentences. So talking to her as well. I'm hoping to. I haven't spoken to her for a while. She's very up and down with me, that one, because they have people on the outside who see my shit, and then it's like Chinese whispers. They completely twist what I'm saying or doing.
Yeah. And
then I get a message from the inmate going, "Oh, my friend said that you blocked her from commenting on your stuff because she was arguing again." And I was like, "I haven't blocked anyone, mate. I literally So there's all these dramas that come with it too. The amount of times I've woken up to angry messages from inmates because I've apparently said something or done something, or there's a video out that her friend and their friend has said this or their friend has said that, and I'm just like, and I'm talking them down for a ledge so many times. Sometimes it's very exhausting.
It's very interesting, but it sounds like hard work.
It is a lot of hard work. It really is, but. Hopefully, I enjoy it. I really enjoy it.
That's the main
thing.
I
enjoy the craft of putting the episodes together, and and building the story for people to listen to. But then again, as I say, I was stressing about something. I always stress about then the next story. And then go, is this going to be good enough? Are people going to enjoy this one and that sort of stuff? So, it's good, but it comes with its own stresses.
It's very good. So what's next then?
Next, so we've done Doris Moore, Kimberly Boone. Next is David Talley, the 100 Years. Then after that, we've got Amelia Carr, who's the death row inmate. Then we got Al Reiner, who was a Christian guy who then got caught up with the Mexican mafia, ended up at a killing.
Yeah.
So he's doing a life sentence. We got Rio coming up. Who else have we got? There's about 10 inmates all up at the moment, and I'm always getting more and more, and the more connections obviously I make within the prison, the more stories I hopefully get, because I want this to be able to continue for.
Could become a show.
Well, that's what I just want it to keep going, because I enjoy doing it. And I want it to be, I want longevity there.
Yeah.
So hopefully, fingers crossed, I can keep bringing more and more stories. But as I said, not everyone wants to talk. I've messaged a number of people, and you just crickets. Even I spoke to David Talley. I'm like, he actually, he got me onto one other prisoner, and it's like, this guy might talk, but he said the dudes in prison. It's like dudes in real life, outside of prison, they don't want to talk. They don't want to tell their stories, and they don't want to, unload their emotional baggage and that sort of stuff. So it's hard to get them to talk. Whereas the ladies love a chat. So
yeah, sweet, it's good content.
No, look, it is. It's great. I mean, 4:30 in the morning, listening to stories of murder and all sorts. It's fascinating. Sometimes.
Did your wife get worried?
No, mate. No. We've been together.
Women. My falling
It's so funny, actually. The Doris at one point was like, "Oh, have you got a photo just you can send us so I can show so we can see what you look like?" And I'm scrolling through my photos, going, "Do I find like a half attractive photo? Do I give him a little bit of something, a little bit of cheek? Like, what am I doing?" But no, my wife is not worried, mate, in any sense, shape, or form. We've been together over 10 years, so. Yeah, she couldn't care less. She just wants me to make some money so I can help pay the bills.
Well, hopefully soon.
You never know. Who knows? We'll see what happens. I was talking to. I'm going to do a wanky name drop here, but I was talking to Ed Sheeran and
what?
I know. Sorry, name drop. Let me just pick that up. But I was talking to Ed Sheeran, and then he said something to me because I said to him, "Do you ever have a plan B?" And he said, "No." He said, "I share." He said, "There's 7 or 8 billion people in the world." I knew that some of them would like my music. So I'm just taking that. I'm like, there's 7 or 8 billion people in the world. I think, some people like the podcast. So,
Fuck.
So at this stage, I don't have a plan B.
Don't need one. Alrighty. Well, anyway, we will drop Jack's Instagram, the podcast link.
Thank you.
Everything below.
I very much appreciate you having me. And can I just say, I love your setup. It is. I need myself one of these setups.
It's not bad. This isn't where I usually do it all the time. If I do it with the other bloke, I do it with Ryan. Normally we do it in my house, but
because I do it in literally a room with no windows.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and it's very depressing sometimes. But no, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm sorry I rambled on for hours.
No, it's good. Our listeners will love that. So
thank you.